Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're tuning in from. I'm delighted that you've joined us today for an exclusive demo on complete traceability for modern food and beverage manufacturing. I'm Romina, Sales and Marketing here at Icicle, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. Thank you for joining us to explore modern traceability solutions for food and beverage manufacturing. Before we begin, a few housekeeping notes. We are recording today's session, so you can reference it later or share it with your colleagues who couldn't attend live. We've reserved time for question and answers at the end of the presentation today, so please use the Zoom chat features to submit your questions throughout the session, or you can raise your hand during the Q&A portion so we can address them one by one. If you prefer to ask questions anonymously, you're welcome to send me a direct message and I'll ask the question on your behalf. In case you haven't crossed paths with our team before here at Icicle, it's great to meet you. And for those of you who have joined our online events in the past, welcome back. We're the creators of Icicle, a complete AI-enabled software solution for food and beverage manufacturers. I say we for a couple of reasons. One, our featured presenter is Icicle founder and CEO Stephen Burton, who created the software. And number two, we have a couple of members of the Icicle community tuning into the webinar today, who I'm sure have requested a number of software features that helps us continuously improve our solution to elevate all of our users. It's our mission in life to make food and beverage manufacturing safer and more efficient by unifying and simplifying operations. A big part of this is ensuring compliance for our clients with the latest industry standards, so you can focus on what really matters for your business, profitability, growth, and your long-term goals. The Icicle ERP suite includes solutions for food safety and quality, warehouse traceability, procurement and supplier management, product formulation, maintenance and equipment, as well as sales, costing, and forecasting solutions to help you maximize profitability. We work with small to mid-sized companies and support seamless scale-ups that nurture a strong food safety culture. Icicle helps satisfy all GFSI certification program requirements out of the box without the need for any custom development. Our customers are leveraging smart automation to reduce costs for food safety and quality, admin and support, documentation. We also save you time in preparing for audits and shorten audit duration times. I'm proud to say we help a number of our customers reduce waste, rework, scrap, and returns, all of which add up considering the sometimes razor-thin margins in the food industry. One of my favorite success stories is how we saved one of our customers in California $1.4 million a year by identifying an issue with packaging waste. In addition, Icicle also helps reduce travel and consulting costs by allowing documentation creation and reviews to be completed remotely. Before we dive into traceability with Steve today, I wanted to let you know that we'll be sharing a free resource with you as a follow-up to this webinar. Keeping traceability records manually is no easy feat, and if you're based in the United States, exporting or planning to export to the United States, you might want to keep an eye on the traceability requirements from the FDA. This handy checklist will help you ensure that you capture all necessary critical tracking events and key data elements to satisfy all of these in the future. By the way, Icicle will help you cover all of this automatically. It's my pleasure to introduce Stephen Burton, founder and CEO of Icicle. With decades of experience in manufacturing and technology consulting, as well as the development of Icicle, Stephen has helped hundreds of manufacturers implement robust traceability systems that not only meet regulatory requirements, but drive operational excellence. Today, he'll demonstrate how Icicle's integrated platform provides complete visibility across your operations by automating traceability, documentation, and ensuring recall readiness. Over to you, Steve.
Hello, thank you for coming, everybody. Today, it's a little bit different format than a lot of my webinars. We're doing actually a live demo of the system. So this is the production actual application itself. Two things I just want to mention before we start. One is that we have a UI redesign that's coming out in about a little less than 2 months. So it's going to look the same functionality exactly, but there's going to be a little bit of difference in terms of the layout and kind of look and feel. It's going to be kind of more modern and attractive. The second thing I wanted to mention is that when I first started developing Icicle about 11 years ago, it was a pure food safety application. And in terms of traceability, I naively assumed that, the industry was well serviced by existing warehouse management systems that had amazing traceability. And you can imagine my surprise when I found out that that actually wasn't the case, that there was quite a lot of room for improvement. And so we set about building the traceability and then warehouse management and then procurement and sales and everything else until now Icicle is quite a comprehensive system. But the topic that we're going to talk about today is specifically the traceability piece. So we're going to restrict ourselves to that. So just before we dive into the demo, though, I wanted to just bring up briefly a couple of slides here. Here we go. So first of all, I wanted to kind of just describe the traceability process. So, and interestingly, this is AI generated. I went through 5 different AI services to try to generate the right kind of diagram. If anybody's worried about their losing their job to AI, it ain't happening today, because you could see that there's a little bit of a mistake here. But the basic paradigm is that the traceability chain starts at receiving, and then you go through, and there could be a variety of different transformation actions that you take. You can do production or work orders, a lot of people call them. You can do sort of simple transforms. You can break down boxes into individual units. You can decompose products. And then ultimately you ship it out. That this is the error here, is that it reversed these two, and I couldn't get it to correct that. But you would ship it out, and then afterwards, God forbid, there could be a recall. And then in terms of the recall, sometimes the product has to be brought back in. And the whole thing is kind of in the middle of all of that, there's all these inventory transactions that occur, and that happens in the warehouse management piece. Anyway, here's the little diagram I was just displaying. Okay, so, and then I just wanted to go through some of the kind of key traceability considerations. And I sort of broke it down into different buckets. And the green highlighted ones are ones that are really kind of unique or have special characteristics specific to the food industry that not everybody can handle. And this is my last slide, so I promise I'm not going to take you through detailed slides, but just to give you some of the highlights here, you have shipping and receiving. That's where the traceability chain starts and also ends, right? So you've got suppliers and customers. You've got co-packers. Sometimes a lot of facilities today are using co-packers, maybe for packaging, maybe for all their product production. You could have offsite storage facilities, and then you transform the products. So food manufacturers, food processors, that's what they're all about, is transforming raw materials into finished products. Production and breaking down boxes into smaller units, simple transformations like you'd find in any kind of industry, or sort of, very run-of-the-mill vanilla sort of activities. But the decomposition of products into constituent elements is fairly unique to the food industry. There's a few other ones that do it, pharmaceuticals as well, oil and gas, other kinds of industries, but it's not very common in a lot of traceability systems. So you have to make sure that you can decompose. And to give you an example, you might get cow's milk, and then you want to separate the cow's milk into cream and then skim milk, and then you might want to recombine it later into 2% or 1% or whatever. So this is a little bit of an unusual feature. A lot of food processes are multiple stages. So you've got work in progress, WIPs that you're assembling and then using later in subsequent steps, maybe many times. You might have a WIP that you're using in multiple different production runs after the fact. So there's a lot of complexity there. Money in the food industry is often dictated by weight. So having the ability to track things like drying losses is quite unique. Rework, so the notion that an output from one production run can be the input into the next is often not supported in other traceability systems. And running multiple outputs at the same time, different pack sizes, white labeling for different customers, a variety of different reasons why you might want to do that. We've got on the warehouse management side, it's pretty much standard. You have to have a lot of flexibility in your bin locations, racking and picking to manage the product's movement around your warehouse and shipping products out to customers. You need to be able to do cycle counts and inventory adjustments. You need to account for shrinkage. And of course, you need real-time inventory, so you know what you have in stock. On the QA side, you've got QA hold, which is sort of an unusual inventory location that needs to be treated very specially, because once you put something in QA hold, you don't want that to be inadvertently released to shipping or to be used in production. So that's a special case. And you have disposal. And then pretty much everything in terms of recalls is quite unique. You have to be able to demonstrate mock recalls. Most GFSI or regulatory compliance managers would ask you to do one within 2 hours. So you really don't have time to do that manually if you have any complexity or any volume in your production system. You need to be able to define the scope. Is it local? Is it international? You need to be able to assemble reports that include, a complete list of all the items that are recalled, even through complicated production processes. You need to be able to do mass balance calculations, which really is just a fancy way of saying, provide a list of where everything is and whether or not it needs to be addressed. You need to be able to provide notification recipient lists so that you can notify customers that a recall occurred, if God forbid it did. And then you have to have a bunch of different kind of corrective actions, root cause analysis, flagging users for retraining, all kinds of things associated with the recall. So it's not just the simple kind of, products in, products out, very simple. It's actually fairly complex especially on the recall side. And then there's some technological considerations as well. Are you going to use scanners? Our paradigm design in Icicle is that we support manual or scanner-based input. So if you don't have a scanner handy, or your battery's dead, it's not going to stop your operation. But we do recommend that people use scanners, and Icicle supports scanners. And the reason why you want to do that is both to save time, but even more importantly, to eliminate human errors. Manual systems, it's astonishing how many times, including myself, would just transpose two numbers inadvertently, and then your traceability chain is broken. So it's really important to capture your traceability at the lot code level accurately at receiving, and then to avoid having to transcribe it down onto pieces of paper manually, anywhere along the line, all the way to shipping. And there's also some organizations, some operations should be RFID enabled. So that's another consideration for you. Okay, that's my slides. Now I will show you the actual Icicle application. So there's just a little bit of setup that kind of has to happen before we jump into the traceability chain in terms of Icicle. You're going to want to forecast your production, plan your production. We have interfaces that suggest to you what raw materials you should order and when you should order it and from whom you should order, how much you should order. You issue purchase orders, which is what you're looking at right here. And then when the purchase orders are fulfilled, when you receive that raw material, that's really at the beginning of your traceability chain. And your obligations, I'm sure everybody knows this, but regulatory obligations is one step forward, one step back. You need to know where everything came from at the lot code level, and you need to know where everything is going as well. I should also mention that it's not always just lot code level. Sometimes a lot of businesses would have serialized inventory where they have license plates or serial numbers. So you need to support that too if you're that kind of organization. So here we have a purchase order, and we've ordered it from a particular supplier from cocoa beans. And the items that are on it are some organic coconut oil, some vanilla extract, and some beans. This is actually a Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory bean to bar company. So we just use this for a fun little bit of a demo. But the important thing here is that somebody in the procurement department is going to place an order. And this is important because you want to make sure that your workers who are receiving the product know what to expect, which products are on order and how much of each product, so that you're not short shipped or overshipped. At the end of the rainbow, we collect all of this data. We present sort of various sorts of dashboards that'll show you kind of, the days receivings like this one, various graphs, what your top products are, who the top purchasers are, that sort of thing. And that's kind of at the end. We have various dashboards as well for the warehouse management aspect of the traceability. So you can see what shipments are arriving today. The first one you can see here is late, for example. So you just want some sort of reporting on both the inbound and outbound side on the logistics. But the very start of the traceability chain starts here. And I showed you a very simple interface here. We try to keep everything kind of simple in a complex world. That's how we design it. And this is the simplest possible interface that we could come up with for tracking the items that you're going to receive. So here with this interface, you could either activate a scanner and scan a barcode. Now, there's an internationally compliant standard for barcodes called GS1. And specifically, the traceability barcode is a GS1 128. I can show somebody an example if you make a request for that. But what it does is it allows the product to be read so you can identify the product uniquely, globally, and also parse the lot code. Lots of times there's also additional information like the weight of the product counts, that sort of thing. But the two key elements are, what product it is and what's the lot code. If you didn't have a scanner, you could simply type in a couple of letters, and Icicle would scan that, would return that for you. As the users are entering that information into Icicle, it assembles this complicated, receiving record. So what this record is here is this is really for the warehouse manager or receiving manager to be able to see a consolidated view of everything that they've received. So, in this case, we've got, a cocoa bean company sent a truck to this particular facility, Wonka's chocolate factory, on such and such a date. It was delivered on this date. You can mark whether or not the COA has been received, if when you can finalize it so it can't be changed after the fact. And then you can see all the individual items that were received. So here we've got, the organic coconut oil. We can see we received 3 lots. We can see the quantity of each one of these lots. We can see that we ordered 10 units, and because this is just a demo account and lots of funny looking data ends up showing up in demo accounts, we can see that we actually have over received by 209 units. So you can decide at receiving whether or not you want to accept overages or maybe send them back. So it's really up to you. Most companies will accept them and then negotiate some sort of a deal with the supplier to get a break on the overage or ship it back. The other thing that you see here, 2 things, is that you see a couple of different icons. These icons allow you to print receiving labels. So as I mentioned before, you want to capture that lot code only at receiving. And then after that, you want people just to select it or scan it and never have to copy it into the system or, God forbid, on a piece of paper ever again. So this allows you to generate the labels. And the labels, this is a 2D version. We do 1D and 2D. I recommend the 2D whenever possible. The reason for that is that there's more error correction and greater data density that you can put in these 2D labels. It looks like a QR code. It's actually called a data matrix barcode. And these have better scan reliability. So, if you scan 100 labels, you're going to get, a much higher success rate than on the 2D ones. Plus, they don't smudge as easily. They don't get folded as easily. They're quite a bit better. But the thing about it is that not everybody can support 2D. You have to have an imaging scanner to do that. So if you only have like a 1D scanner, like you see at a supermarket with the red, kind of alien light flashing back and forth, that's the 2D one. So we do support both if you only have the other one. The other important thing that you need to deal with here is allergen management in your receiving records. So you can see that this product, this chocolate liquor, came in and it contains milk, soy, and tree nuts, which doesn't make sense for chocolate liquor, but it's just a demo account, as I mentioned. So you've got but the important thing here is that we're flagging allergens so that the receiver knows that these need to be segregated when you receive those raw materials so that you mitigate the risk of cross-contamination. Many in the food industry would already know that about half of all recalls, which oftentimes are extinction level events for companies, are caused by undeclared allergens finding their way into products. So this is a critically important feature to have. You've got the ability to capture signatures here. We've got inspections that you can do. You can do detailed ones or very kind of simple ones. If things go off the rail, you can launch an incident. You can make comments. You can keep track of your skids that are going in and out. So like check pallets, if you want to keep track of those. And throughout Icicle, you can upload images and documents. So you can upload, for example, the waybill or the purchase order, whatever you want to, and attach it directly to the receiving record. Now, once you've received the item, so the way I would do that here is I would click edit, I would enter all my items, and then I click save. And then at that point, I've got inventory in stock. So you need an interface that allows you to see the inventory, and it's critically important that it's done by lot code. So here's my inventory right here. And by default, it's showing me all the products I have in stock, the quantities that's on hand, my reorder levels, my maximum inventory levels, etc. Financial information only visible to people who have permission to see that. But you have to be able to track it by lot code. So if I turn the lot code on, then it's going to refresh, and now I can see the lot codes here. Okay. So just to hammer that home for the last time, everything in the food company, in order to have an effective traceability chain, must be tracked by lot code. Sometimes also serial number, but definitely by lot code. So that's what we're showing here. You can also do other things like click the scanner, scan a barcode to pop the single record, so you don't have to search for it. There's lots of kind of nuances like that are important to be able to do inventory adjustments here is another one in terms of the costing side. Now, once I've got the inventory in stock, the next step in my traceability chain is oftentimes going to be to move it from the receiving dock into the warehouse so that I know where it is. So for that, we have racking interfaces. And this is also mobile friendly interface. A lot of people will use a scanner like a Zebra or a Honeywell that has a QWERTY keyboard on that. That's kind of important because sometimes it's good to be able to do some data entry, even though your objective is to minimize the data entry that you might be doing. But running this on some sort of mobile device and scanner is a good idea. I do see the odd warehouse where people will kind of get all their workers to write everything down on a piece of paper and enter it at the end of the day. That is an absolute disaster. Do not do that, because that makes the workers resentful about the fact that they're having to do double the work. They have to do it their old way plus now a new way. It doesn't really work. So you need to make sure that they have the support and the equipment that they need to be able to do it once and do it right electronically. Here, what I'm doing is I have a particular warehouse that's my default. I can go to a particular inventory location. I can see the items that are in that location. I can pick some of those items. Now you can imagine it sitting on my pallet and I'm driving it to some other area. Where am I driving it to? I'm going to drive it to production, and then I'm going to transfer it. That's all there is to it. Very simple. Now that those items have been transferred to production, where they're going to be staged to be consumed in a production run. On the production run side, there's quite a bit to this as well that's kind of upstream of this. What this one here is this is the production run input and output. So this is a specific interface that's designed for the workers who are adding the raw materials to the day's production, and they can capture that, in this interface here. Before this happens, you of course want to forecast your production. So you do that by creating, booking sales, by setting minimum inventory levels, and Icicle will take that data, suggest to you what you should make, when you should make it. You're going to want to schedule that. And then when it happens, you're going to see this type of interface where you're recording what's in here. So what I'm looking at now is a production of a particular product. So this is my golden ticket bar, the product I'm producing today. I'm using a particular formula for that. So it's possible that your products may have more than one formula. During the product design phase, that's very common. Different times of year, that can be common. Different geographical locations. If you're a multi-facility kind of enterprise, that would be common. So you pick the formula when you're creating the production run as well. Then the system assigns a lot code. Lot codes are very kind of diverse in the way that people create them. What I recommend is a date-based lot code. And ideally, what you want to do is have something that's going to be like, the year and then month, day, or the year and then a Julian date or something like that. And I see people both create their lot codes based on production date or sometimes expiration date. So either one is totally fine. The really important thing here is that when you're creating your production, though, you want those codes to be automatically generated. There's nothing that can break your traceability chain so easily as running a bunch of production with the wrong lot code, putting it on the boxes, and then after the fact you change the lot code. We actually don't allow that, because what that means is that you've got all kinds of products in the warehouse with the wrong labels that can't be matched to any product in inventory. So if you can automate the process of creating your lot codes so that they're all standard and you never make a mistake. That's going to go a long ways to making sure that you've maintained the integrity of your traceability chain. Likewise, the best before date should be automatically generated. So if you define how many days of shelf life you've got for a particular product, that can be automatically generated too. So no reason to try to do that manually. Last thing you want is to make a mistake there and have products pulled off the shelf earlier because you got the wrong date on there. When you go to create production, you're going to have some sort of target quantity that you want to make. So there's another part of Icicle that's upstream from this, which is the ability to define the formula. So you can define what's your batch size, how many units are in the batch size, what ingredients are going to be used to create your batch. And then at that point, you can plan your production. And if you say one batch, or you say two batches, or you say 300 units, or whatever, however you want to do it, Icicle will scale the BOM for you. So you know how much raw material you should be using in order to get the planned quantity of the product that you're producing. So here we've got some soy lecithin, we've got some sugar, we've got some barley, some chocolate liquor, and you can see the quantities of each one of these that are going to be required. And then you can also see the quantity of each one that's already been used with the variance. So this makes it very easy for you to be able to say, to look at this just at a glance and say, oh, I forgot to add the soy lecithin, or I haven't added that yet. So you can add it. In order to add add the item, you can do that one of two ways. You can go up here to the top to this scan button, and you can scan the barcode that I showed you before that you took at receiving. Or the other way you can do it is you can click on the little chevron here, and Icicle will go into the system. Let me see if I have any inventory here. Nope. Chocolate liquor. Yeah. So what it'll do is it'll show me all the inventory that I have in stock. It'll tell me exactly where it is. It'll tell me how much I've used of each of these lot codes already. It also organizes it in FIFO order. So you can make sure that you use your oldest ingredients first, because of course you don't want to end up with stale ingredients because you use the newer ones too soon. I can see here that I used even more than I'd actually required. Icicle does allow you to do that. It shows that there's a 45.5% overage, and it's kind of highlighted there in yellow because that's, could be a problem that you want to be aware of. Maybe somebody accidentally, added way too much of the wrong ingredient, or, the right ingredient, but way too much. Or, maybe there's a problem with the production process. You lost some on the floor. There's some vat leaking. There's a variety of reasons that could happen. So you do want to keep track of that. Right at the shop floor kind of level, ideally. You can also see that we've used 3 lots in this particular batch of product. So this is the important part from the traceability perspective, because what we have here is we have an association between the lot of the product that you're producing and the finish and the raw material lots. So I can see that these 3 lots of this raw material have been used to make this lot of finished products. And you can even look at the lot history of that particular item if you wish to do that. The last thing in here, which is just reinforcing the whole allergen prevention issue or cross-contamination issue, is that it flags each ingredient with the allergens that it contains to give the workers kind of a heads up that they need to be careful with that product so they don't mix it with something else by mistake. Right? But once I add any particular item of that product, I can save that record, and now I've got this association. And I can go on to continue. Now, for traceability purposes for the food industry, we don't just need to track the ingredients, we also need to track the materials. And the difference between the ingredients and the materials are that the ingredients are substances that are consumed during the manufacturing process and that end up on the label. Materials are ancillary substances like processing aids, like lubricants and sanitizers in this particular example. And you need to keep track of those as well, because this is the kind of thing that, an inspector or an auditor is going to flag you on, and they're going to try to be tricky and say, okay, we want you to do a mock recall, but not on the ingredient. We want you to do it on this particular lot of lubricant or something. So to be prepared for those sorts of tricky questions is really great. There's also the possibility that there really could be a recall at a lubricant or a sanitizer, in which case you do need to know which products contain or were potentially exposed to those recalled materials. The same is true with packaging. So you need all the packaging that goes into that particular production run. And here's the byproducts that go out the other end. And there's two outputs that you could do from this particular run. So what it's doing here is it's producing the primary product. What we're trying to produce is golden ticket bars. But in addition to that, we're also getting some byproducts that's coming out of it as chocolate liquor. And in this particular case, this chocolate liquor is actually a rework. So it's, we're using it up, but there may be some leftovers. So we have the ability to output that, and then I can use it again in another production run. This is also the place where you might have multiple products running at the same time, maybe for a white labeled customer that you're producing for, in addition to your own brand, or for other reasons as well. So the important thing here is that you can output multiple products at the same time. Critically important from the traceability perspective, and each one of those needs to have a lot code. By default, the best practice is really to have the same lot code for the production run and for any byproduct that comes out, but we do provide the opportunity for you to create your own if you want. And here you can generate as well, you can generate case labels like this one that has the GS1128 barcode. You can choose what's on it. In this case, we also had a G1014 and some storage requirements. But the important thing really is that you should have a scannable traceability barcode. You should have the name of the product clearly indicated and the lot code clearly indicated. These are the important elements. The rest of them are all you can configure. And we also support the 2D data matrix type as well. But for products that you're producing like this one, which is a finished product, you probably want to use a 1D barcode, even though it's less reliable in terms of scanning, because when you ship it out and it goes out into the wild, you don't necessarily know if your customers or distributors or the people that they sell it to have the appropriate equipment to scan 2D barcodes. So to be safe, 1D barcode. There is less information that you can encode reliably, though, into a 1D barcode, which is another problem with that particular code from a traceability perspective. And the reason is because if I start to add, a serial number and a weight and a production date and two other elements, pretty soon those lines get so thin that the scanners can't discern between them. So you have even lower scannability, readability, reliability. So better to keep this simple. So the way we do that is we only really allow you to do put three things: the G1014, which uniquely identifies the product, which is the 01 IA there, the number 10 AI, which is the lot code, and then one other element like the weight or the serial number. With the 2D data matrix barcodes, you can encode on, basically as much information as you want. It's really not a problem, like a QR code. I think that's really the only important thing here. Icicle does do things like adds up the cost and tells you what the actual costs are. There's another interface for this, which is the master view of the production. This particular one is only for production inputs and outputs. And we do have another one as well, which is for quality assurance and quality control checks specifically. And then there's that master view that's not really relevant right now. There is another way that sometimes users might want to convert raw material into finished products, which is this transform interface. So this is a highly flexible interface that allows you to basically use anything, any input to produce any output. There's no formula involved, so you don't have that kind of, backup in terms of the correct quantities to be used. You don't have the ability to do the QC checks directly from this interface, although you can still do them using one of the food safety options. But this just allows you to convert anything to anything else. One of the things that people use this one quite commonly for is if there's they have made a mistake with the lot code and they need to transform it from one to another by entering the raw material here and then converting it to a different lot code. So I can, take, how many do I have of those? I have 122. If I take 10 of those, and then I can actually have the same item that's coming out. I have to say where it's going to. So I'm going to put it to receiving, and it fills in the lot code information automatically but I can change that if I want to. So if I wanted to change that to, tomorrow's date, I could do that. And also you can convert the quantity. So I could combine 10 into one if I wanted to do that. But in this case, I'll go 10 to 10. And then when I click the transform button, this is the best before date. When I click the transform button, it's now converted that one item into a different item with a different lot code. The reason why it's important to do that is because you don't want to break your traceability chain. If we run a recall report, we need to know that that previous lot code was, the output of the production run. And then when you change the lot code, you want a record of that so that you can track that back and maintain that traceability link. Okay. Another key aspect is kind of the locations of your facility. So under logistics here, we have inventory locations. I see many companies, even fairly significant ones, that just have one inventory location. That's all they're worried about. And I see others, I think the record right now is 20,000 individual inventory locations. So you need the ability to define those locations. A lot of people would call them bin locations. And also they need to be able to be nested as well. So you need to be able to say, okay, I've got warehouse A, and in warehouse B, warehouse A, I've got 10 racks. And in the 10 racks, I have 4 shelves each. And you need that kind of level of granularity and to have the notion that one location can be within another location. Here we can look at a particular inventory location. This is my receiving location. And we can very easily see exactly what's in that location. And we can do adjustments here, or we can transfer things from one location to another from this interface as well. You can also you can generate barcodes that you can put in that location, so you can scan it to pop that location without having to search for it every time. And some people, not very common, but some people want to see shipping kind of a bin location manifest, which is going to show, all the items that are in that particular location at any one time. Usually that's more like for a, kind of a bin location, like a particular slot in a rack, as opposed to an entire, area of the facility. And then, you might print this out on a large piece of paper and put it up, on the rack. Particularly useful if it's high up. So you can, print a giant version of this so that it can be seen from 15 feet down. Might be an interesting one. Again, we've got the items, but also the lot codes. Critically important every time, lot code. So if you use that, a racking interface, you can send the workers to pick up a particular lot code. So they need to know what the lot codes are in order to make sure they pick the right ones. Another very common way to break your traceability chain is to use the wrong lot code. That said, we don't enforce the use of only particular lot codes. So even though we are all about FIFO to extend your shelf life of your raw materials as much as possible, there are cases where sometimes, a specific lot code is suggested, but you go there to find it, you find out that, it's blocked out the door somehow, or that it's being blocked with a container and you can't get to it. So there's a variety of reasons why you don't want a system that's going to enforce a particular lot code, only suggest it. So that's what we do. On the other side of the coin, what we're in the business here for is really for sales. So here's a sales order that's come in from a particular customer, happens to be called the dairy farm in this case. I've got my sales order. We've got all kinds of, sales reports and sales dashboards and that sort of thing. But the important thing here is that they've ordered some raw material or some finished products on this. There's also another kind of scenario, or really 2 other scenarios here, which is, this one is a sales order that is going to be shipped to a particular customer. But you might also have interfacility shipments, and you also might have offsite storage facilities. So you've got to make sure that, all of those are supported in your traceability system as well, so that kind of where everything is, and you can track the flow in and out of each facility separately. The interface that you would use inside the facility is another one of these that's optimized for mobile devices. And this one here is a picking interface. So oftentimes this would also run on one of those handheld scanners. And what you would, what you do here is you pick the sales order, and when you pick the sales order, it shows you the items that are on order. So in this particular case, I've got this Patty's Food Company placed this order. You can see the sales order number is 1023, and there's an alert here because there's special instructions with respect to this specific customer. So sometimes customers might give you instructions, take their product around to the back door. We're only open from 8 to 4, whatever. So you give the people that are picking the order, the heads up that there's something special about this order. Those are more driver instructions. For the pickers, it might be, a particular way that they want the product packed, particular temp, variation in the reefer temperature that they're looking for. So you might want to be able to display those sorts of messages there. The user can pick the product either by scanning it, which we recommend, or you can pick it off the list. And when you pick it off the list, it'll show you everything that you've got in stock, again, in FIFO order. You can see they need 1,000 units. So you can, as you go through and you pick the items, you can select each unit. It'll kind of give you a subtotal. It'll show you how much is still outstanding. And then you can go and you can, use up all that raw material or all that finished product until you end up with, the fulfilled order, right? And once you save that, then you can ship it from here. So I can ship it. I can either send it to a new shipment. I can create a new shipment directly from this interface. Or if I've got a truck already waiting, like, truck 6 for Patty's Foods, I can load that onto that existing truck that's waiting for me, and I can confirm that. And then now those orders have been loaded onto the truck and can be shipped. And then the last step in the traceability chain is the shipping details. So this is the actual record of the items going out to this particular customer. In this case, it's Costco. And Costco, received 122 units of these 2 items. It gives you the weight, and most importantly, it gives you the lot code of each one as well. So that's the critical part to completing that traceability chain. And this needs to be communicated to the customer. So in order to communicate it to the customer, one thing we do is we enable you to generate packing slips like this one that'll show the items on it with the lot codes. Also for the shipper, you might want to generate a bill of lading. So this is the bill of lading, also with the lot codes on it. So everything's got the lot codes on it, which is the important thing. Now, this kind of brings us to the end of that traceability chain. We've received our raw materials, we've moved them around the warehouse, we've consumed them either through production or transform. We might have done other things that I didn't show you, like, dispose a product that was expired, or you found an insect infestation or something like that. So you need to be able to capture all those sorts of things. You need to be able to do inventory adjustments when you do cycle counts and you find out that your inventory is out of whack because it's there's some shrinkage or whatever. So all these different types of transactions need to be recorded. And the way Icicle works, which is quite unique, is that it generates actually inventory transactions with debits and credits exactly like an accounting system would do. So because each transaction has to always balance to 0, so it has to have debits and credits, and the total amount always has to be 0, this traceability chain, which is for one particular product, is going to be integral regardless of how many steps in the process and how many products are involved or how many production stages are involved in order to come to the finished product. So this is the underlying kind of bedrock that the entire traceability system lives on. Okay, so the important thing, if I just look at the first one here, I can see that I've taken 80 units out of receiving and I moved them to production. And then I took, 902 units and also moved them to production. And then as I go down to look at some kind of different ones here, I can see that on the last one, I've taken 5 items from receiving and I've consumed it in a production run. And then I've got a hyperlink here and I can go look at that production run, or I can look at the receiving record, or I could look at the shipping record, or if it was a maintenance issue, I could look at the work order. So you can see the whole history and exactly where everything is and how it was moved in chronological order. Now, this would hurt your brain if you try to do a recall from this. So we actually provide a dedicated recall interface. So with this interface, you go and you go to create a new recall. So hopefully it's an auditor who's just asking you to demonstrate that you can do a recall. You would actually select a recall template, which predefines corrective actions that should be taken in the event of a real recall. So you can assign a particular task for an individual by a particular day. And then you need to add the details of the recall. So these are required by the regulatory authorities. I'm just going to put test in there for now. And then when you get to the point here where you're generating you get to the search part of it, this is kind of where some of the magic happens. And if I go back to one of my production runs just for a second, and I see these three chocolate liquors that I used, and I also see some coconut oil and some milk, I could pick that lot code of that milk powder if I wanted. I can go back to my recall create interface. I can enter that lot code, and the system will go through all those detailed inventory transactions, and it'll search for, and it finds the actual fortified milk that's the subject of the recall. So what's happening here is that the auditor is saying, okay, demonstrate you can do a mock recall on this particular lot code. And there's some optional information I could fill out at the bottom. I'm going to ignore that for now. And when I click create, Icicle is going to go through, it's going to look at all of the various items, and it's going to generate a recall for me. It's going to calculate the mass balance, and it's also going to kind of come up with a consolidated list of recalled items. So in this case, we've got the subject of our recall, if you recall, was the fortified milk. There was 100 units that were originally received. There were 93 is still outstanding. So far we've only recovered 7%. And the system's detected that some of this fortified milk was used in the chocolate liquor, which in turn was used in 2 batches of the golden ticket bars. And it shows you for each one how much was originally either produced or received, how much is currently outstanding, and how much was recovered. And then it does the detailed mass balance calculation, which is really, I think, the jewel of the Icicle traceability system, which it does a breakdown for you, color coded as to whether or not you need to take action for each item, showing the lot code and the location where it's produced. So here, for example, I need, my fortified milk. I can see that 7 units were consumed. It's green. If you're not colorblind, you could see that, it's green because after it's been consumed, it can't be recovered. So we consider that one good. But we still have 93 units, which is sitting at our production location. This is also hyperlinked, and I could go there and I could move, to dispose of it or put it to QA hold to rework it or whatever it is I decide to do. Plus, there's a whole bunch of other things that you can do with this report, including exporting it. It'll assemble a list of notification recipients. I have another one open here that has a little bit more information on it, including a particular Costco recipient who needs to be notified that there has been a recall. Hopefully that'll never happen to you. Anyway, that's really the end of the traceability. So we started out all the way from the receiving of the raw materials through the transformations to shipping to customers, and then the dedicated recall report. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to field them at this point.
Okay, awesome. Steve, before we jump into our Q&As, I did want to share for those of you who are new to Icicle that we have one of our customers joining us today, Jasmine Byrne of Big Mountain Foods. They joined the Icicle community through BC's Traceability Adoption Program in 2019, and you'll actually see their success story posted on the program website. From their humble beginnings in 1987 to their award-winning status as innovators in the plant-based allergen-free food sector, this women-led company has been making waves in Canada and in a growing number of export markets. Jasmine, welcome. What would you say about your experience with us for those considering software for their food business?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, we've been with Icicle for about 5 years now, and it definitely been a work in progress and kind of upskilling our internal staff to learn and grow with automated and paperless processes. But overall, the benefits of Icicle really have been that we're able to do a mock recall in a very short time, 5 minutes, opposed to looking through tons of paperwork. And our warehouse department has actually been streamlined, as well as actually our batch making. So we've been able to go paperless and have a great place to hold all of our documents, and for warehousing all of the temperature controls and photos of our product leaving the facility, just to make sure we have all our bases covered. And from a QA perspective, it's also great to have all of our incidents that happen in the plant, as well as any customer complaints, in one place that's easy to find and locate, as well as for myself, not always being on the plant floor, I'm able to now receive alerts of anything that's happening live, instead of having to be on the plant floor to find out anything that's happening that's not to standard. So those are some of the pros to using Icicle. And now we're on the next phase, is moving towards some AI initiatives. So we're working with Icicle on how we can implement some of that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jasmine, for being open about your experience with us. So now it's time for our Q&A. For those of you who have joined us and stayed through to the end of the traceability chain, you're welcome to enter your questions into the Zoom chat feature here, or send me a direct message. Steve, we have one question in the chat. Hello, how can I enter the lot code on Icicle when I pick one ingredient with multiple lot codes for production?
So ideally, what you want to do is scan the items, because you don't want to make mistakes by transcribing the lot code. Although you can also select it. So if you're in production, you can bring up the production interface. And actually, maybe it's better if I just switch back to that interface again, rather than waving my arms around and try to describe the process. Hold on a second here. Here we are. Okay, I need to share my screen again. Okay, so we're back at the production input screen. So we need to enter in these raw materials. So if I have multiple lot codes that I want to enter, two ways I could do that. I could simply scan each one, and it would pop the lot code. Or the other way I could do it is I could bring up this interface here, and it'll show me, like, all I did was click on this little chevron, and it shows me all the lot codes that I've got in stock. So if I wanted to, enter 4 of one and 1 of the other, I can simply type those numbers in there, into the corresponding lot code, and I could click save. So the advantage to doing it this way is that everything is in FIFO order, but the scanner might actually be better because it's easier, it's faster, and also we have a production input interface that will allow you to generate a pick list that you can send that out to the shop, to the logistics people. They can grab all of the pieces all the lots that are required, bring them back, and then which ones are going to be needed for that particular job. And that one also organizes everything in FIFO order. So you can use the scanner, very quickly, just scan one item, scan another item, and continue until you've got everything picked.
Steve, it looks like you've explained the traceability chain so clearly, we don't have a lot of questions left. But I did want to bring up one thing, and is, what are the best ways for companies to leverage their traceability data? And I'm thinking about costing specifically, actually, but also open to, after this question, there's one more. But yeah, wanted to just chime in a little bit about leveraging your traceability data.
Yeah. That's actually a kind of an ancillary benefit that's flowed from the way that we developed our traceability. Because when through each stage of the traceability chain, we track not just the lot code and the quantity, but also the cost of the item. So when you initially receive the item, we get the cost either from the purchase order, or you can enter it manually if you want, but then we track the cost at the incoming stage. And then as you transform your raw materials into finished products, Icicle will calculate for you what the total cost is going to be, or is actually, in real time. So this is not like standard costing like you would see in most accounting systems. This is the real actual cost at the lot code level. And not only can you do that, but you can compare that to the theoretical cost, because in the formulation part of Icicle that I didn't show you, there's also the ability to kind of update the latest costs for all your raw materials. So it'll show you what your theoretical costs might be, and then you can compare that to what your actual costs are, and you can see the variance. And the variance can lead you to, a few understandings. It'll help you determine that maybe your original costing model was underestimating and you're losing money, or it could be that you have a problem with a particular machine or a particular worker where they're wasting a lot of material. So being able to track the real cost to the theoretical cost and see the variance provides a lot of value, like the one you mentioned at the beginning, where one of our customers saved $1.4 million a year just because of one such issue that was identified.
Awesome. Steve, another question. How can I plan the half batch sizes with Icicle?
There's no restriction in that regard. So if you wanted to say, first of all, the batch size is just a tool that helps us identify the quantities of the raw material required to make a kind of arbitrary quantity of finished product. So if you said, my batch size is 100, for example, and then today you wanted to say, what was the question there? Half. So you want to do 50, right?
Yes.
So you could either say 0.5 of a batch, or you can say 50 units, and Icicle will scale the BOM down by half, right? So it's super easy to do that.
Okay, that is the last question that we have for Q&As. Let me just bring up a slide here. Just a moment. Okay, so thank you so much, Steve, for your expertise in demonstrating how Icicle's traceability system connects every aspect of food and beverage manufacturing. And thank you to everyone for your engagement and thoughtful questions today. It's wonderful to see everybody come together to address critical traceability challenges. If you're interested in exploring how Icicle's traceability features can be customized to your specific manufacturing process, inventory management, or production needs, we're happy to schedule a personalized demo. Our team can show you precisely how our system would integrate with your existing operations. The recording of today's session will be available on demand in the coming days, and we'll notify you as soon as it's ready for you to access on our website, icicletechnologies.com. I'll also be sending out the checklist as a free resource for you. Again, my name is Romina with Icicle. I hope to see you at our next food production webinar, where we'll be diving deeper into production management for food manufacturing. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we will be in touch very soon.